Malaka, can you hear me? Malaka, can you hear me? Only you have joined yet? Yeah, waiting others to join. Oshani, you have joined. Good morning. Yes. So we'll start until others, getting on. First of all, I wish you all the very best for Nivya, Tarindu, Oshani, and Malaka. Hope we will have a kind of a good year compared to last year in terms of everything. So let's pray for the best of the things that in our way in 2021, so that we are having a lot of challenges ahead, and we need to face them effectively in terms of our personal lives and all, as well as your career and the other achieving other aspirations. Okay, so far that what we have done in development financing is basically we have good morning, Hansani. I wish you a very happy new year. We have done like some SME related stuff during first 3 to 4 weeks, and then today we are moving to discuss microfinancing, which is one of the components in Tarindu, thank you and wish you the same, and your family and your loved ones. Again, we try to understand the microfinancing and its application in the context of development financing, right? So basically, now the first day actually we discussed about what is credit, what is development financing, what is project financing, and some methodologies of lending kind of thing. A basic idea about development or project and credit. Second and third day, basically we discuss about what is like SME banking, type of products that available for SME type of customers, right? And then a definition of SME and all those stuff we started learning. Third day we basically started off learning on sources of financing into SME or rather development oriented customers. So that we discuss about some internal mechanisms, external mechanisms, world organizations, and like sort of SME support available in terms of government and other policy making bodies. So we have done that aspect as well. So what we have done, what we haven't done is basically the issues faced by the SMEs or the remedial actions sort of things, which I'm planning to discuss with past papers, which is again is important in terms of SME and SME lending and SME banking perspective. So today, what we are trying to again discuss is something about microfinancing, which is another subset of this development financing. Because why we say the microfinancing is important in every economy, right? So you can see SMEs are a middle part kind of. So you have corporate customers, top corporates, and those things are upper in the FX, right? In the bottom half, in the bottom line of, if you take this kind of pyramid, so these type of customers are more or less micro entrepreneurs and micro enterprises, because somebody has to look after them as well, because one of the day they become small or medium type of customer. So very important for us to see who this micro segment, who are the players, what are their requirements, and what we can do to uplift their present level, business and personal, and how we can nurture them to bring next level. Because if we are doing support to this micro sector, then they will add lot of value to the economy like SME, maybe beyond that. Because if you take a micro customer can operate within his home. They need not to have, say, whatever, rented building, air conditioning. I mean, so many infrastructure requirements are not needed. Maybe one person, part-time, can do like microfinancing act, which in large numbers could help in economy in a large way. We need to keep that in mind. Right? There are some myths, there are some realities on this microfinancing, application concepts, which we are learning in a little while, because it's very, attractive in terms of what do you call the financial return, and in that perspective. Similarly, it is like kind of a support that banks and non-financial organizations can do to these individuals, in turn to uplift the economy. So that's what basically our plan is today. And let's start the microfinancing session. And again, I have given you a kind of a note that you can refer it once we have done the presentation, which also in a nutshell gives you kind of some basic requirement in order to make a kind of more familiarization about the microfinancing, right? So today's session, we try to cover in the context of country's development, what is microfinance, what is importance, why we think microfinancing is like way forward, right? Then we go to microfinancing in detail about definitions, what are the myths, what are the realities, what are the stakeholders, right? Those things. Then we also try to touch about microfinancing models. There are a couple of models available, and then we try to study a few of those things and how basically those things are operating in practical perspective. Lastly, which is basically Microfinancing Act, passed in Parliament 2016 July, which is not very frequently operating right now, but as far as we are concerned, it is the act being practiced as of today. So you need to know what are the basics, high level understanding about the microfinancing, right? Right. A definition about the developing nations, which I have quoted from American Heritage Dictionary. Average income is much lower than the industrial nations, where if you take two countries, so in a country, if the average income is much lower than the developed country, where the economy relies on few export crops, and where farming is conducted by primitive methods. So that's how they define developing nation. If you try to apply this into Sri Lanka, to some extent, this could be correct, because we are dependent on a few export crops about tea, rubber, sort of thing. So though we have some other export, income, if you think in that perspective, and where the farming is conducted by primitive methods, to that some extent, it's also correct. We are not into industrial agriculture yet. So it is the way that the American Heritage Dictionary defines the developing nation. This is just to get an idea about what is developing nation, what is developed nation, which is important in terms of microfinancing concept. These are something that we need to keep in our mind, where how we are going to determine the development of a country or developing nation. So per capita income, GDP, life expectancy, rate of literacy, human development index. So these are something that anybody can go to the, say, statistical department website and get the latest data. So based on that, that we can define where a particular country is lies on, say, income per capita. So we are in the range of 3,800, I mean below 4,000. So beyond 4,000, one must say it's like what do you call upper, like middle income category. But if 4,000, it's not very great. If you compare some other countries, maybe 12,000 to 30,000 to so and so forth. So income per capita is basically how we are going to derive that is, say, total GDP divided by number of people in the country. So higher the income per capita, it's good. It's a good indication. It's good to say that we are moving to the developing status. And keep one thing in mind. So sometimes we can say, yes, per capita income is high, but again, you need to think about how this income is distributed among the community. Let's say, because when you say averaging GDP divided by number of people, we get a higher figure, but this income distribution could not be equal. In Sri Lanka also, higher income generation is happening at Western province, whereas some other provinces may not generating that income. And you can't see, if you say per capita income is now say $4,000, but it is not equal across the people in our country, because there's a disparity in income distribution also. So that is also important, right? In order, when you are thinking about development status, because it has to be distributed not equally, I must say, comparatively, it has to be a kind of acceptable way. Otherwise, when you say everything done by 10% of the population and they are super rich, whereas the rest of the 90 is not making any contribution, or they are still below the poverty line, then what happens is, then you can't say we are a developed nation, right? So those things are some things that you need to keep in mind. Then GDP, total market value of all goods and services produced within the borders of nation during a specified period. So given last year, so what's the total market value of goods and services? So there are several methods that we can compute this, right? But GDP is a good indication to say that what level, whether GDP is increasing year on year, right? So what rate, so how it's compared to other countries. So it's a good indication to see where our country is locating, performing. Life expectancy. So for the women, for the men, there may be a different, the expectancy, but higher, the expectancy is better for a country, because if we assume that they can contribute to a kind of the economy, and also it shows that the standard of the living and standard of health and other conditions. So that's why we say the life expectancy of a country. Rate of literacy also important if you think about the knowledge perspective. Yeah, if more and more people are with high literacy, so they can contribute a lot in terms of human aspects, or human capital, so that a country could go up in the ladder. Human Development Index also, health and well-being being measured, so that's again important statistic. So here I have given some data relevant to each and every country. So what you can do is you can go to the kind of statistical department website, central bank websites, where you can get updated numbers on these parameters. These statistics is important. Like when you in a general perspective also it is important, and when you are talking to, when you are in a kind of forum, so it's good that where our country is heading. What is total debt to GDP? What's the total debt level? What's the annual debt component that we need to pay? What is our reserve ratio? What is our balance of payment? What is our GDP growth or economic growth rate? Right? What's the the local debt and international debt? What's the the exchange rates in terms of key the denominations, right? So those things are important for us, because not because that you are learning development financing, but in general also as bankers, it's good that we are open to these kind of developments and data statistics, important for us in general, plus exam purposes also. Sometimes exam, so they might ask very very simple question about GDP about maybe about 2019, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 3,800, 5,000, 2,000, 7,000. So if you know that range, so you can get 2 marks. So that's what basically our purpose of knowing this. while we are trying to learn the the microfinancing and the development nation status parameters. Then what are the factors? This is again important, general, and again sometimes when kind of a question comes, so we need to understand this. What are the factors contributing to developing nations? So earlier actually we have seen the end result, right? But the GDP per capita, literacy rate, human development index, and all that. So in order to come to these numbers, we need to know what are the factors in a country, right? So like this. So rapid population growth, it's a factor. Lack of industrialization, it's a factor. Lack of infrastructure, political turmoil, economic vulnerability, minimal education. So these are the things that one has to look for. So if you see every government through their budget or their financial policy and otherwise, they are trying to attack on these segments. You have seen that more investment into the health, more investment to the education, and focus on infrastructure, country political situation more stable. They try to see economy in a kind of more controlled way. Why? Because now if we are trying to do those things, then the outcome of those could be in support to countries' economic development or developing nation state, achieving developing nation status. So those are the things that one has to be in mindful, right? Now, why that every government is trying to do, different things in terms of infrastructure, about BOI investments, foreign direct investments, right? So rather than you work on like day-to-day functions, you think about capex, capital investments, human investment, like giving jobs and so make them more productive, more efficient kind of thing. So those things are the activities that you need to work on. Once you are trying to do those things, it automatically helps as a nation their development. So these are important things. And if somebody is asking to see, so what's happening in Sri Lanka? So think whether we are in right direction. Are we taking right policies and actions and strategies in place to address these things? If so, yes, we can expect better things tomorrow, day after, future. If not, if we are trying to manage day-to-day living kind of thing, so then obviously we are in a difficulty in time to come. I just give an example about say debt. We talk about debt, right? So higher debt kind of thing. But in order to, I think I have told this previously, if I remember correct, like the issue here is, now debt is not a problem, right? For us also, let's say personally, if you want to put up a house, if you want to purchase a vehicle, if you want to pursue further education, yes, you don't have adequate money with you. You might go to a bank and financial institution and get some money, and you do some useful thing which have impact on today and future, right? So what happens is, if you take a loan and do a kind of a say MBA, and if you are not pursuing that outcome in terms of monetary, in terms of career perspective, then yes, there is a question. But if you are turning that whatever the knowledge, expertise, skills that you got through MBA, through that qualification, got a higher career prospects, that gives you a return, right? So then you get a higher salary, and then with that is not a problem. In Sri Lanka also, if you take about, yes, higher debt is an issue. But if the GDP is not moving, yeah, then we have issue. So debt to GDP ratio, that you need to think about, rather than absolute debt of 20 trillion. And then you say, we are higher debt, we can't do anything. So that is not to complain. But if you say the debt to GDP right now is 90, and we have come down to 70, good achievement. So in other terms, in some other countries, debt to GDP is even more than 100, like maybe Japan and so even US. But nobody is complaining, right? Why? Because though the debt to GDP is high, So they are making some money, right? Their investments are coming, export income is there, they get dollars, get whatever the cash flow to country. So it's happening. So then you need not to worry. So anyway, end of the day, you are worrying whether you can pay off the debt. Right? In personal situations also, we are trying to establish the customers can pay whatever granted, right? Debt service cover ratio, right? Interest cover ratio, right? So if they're happy with that, so we are fine with that. But yes, debt equity is something that you need to be worried with. Beyond that, may not be allowing. But I mean to say that, you should not be overly worried about debt, right? Only thing is, you have to have a manageable debt. Personal, organizational, country as well. So for that, you need to work. So yes, you need to get debt to do infrastructure, industrialization, industrial agriculture, right? For that, and then you make more GDP, more economic growth. Then debt is not a problem. But if you take a debt and you have to do nothing, then debt is going to increase, GDP is coming down, then you are in a debt trap. True enough, because you can't pay debt. That is how we have to see it. Then not in further absolute perspective. Right. Then we come to microfinancing in economic development. So like SME, microfinancing also very important aspect in terms of economic development in the country. Why? Large number of micro entrepreneurs, micro enterprises are present in the country. So if they take in collective basis, they can do wonders. And let's see how we can do it and how they are supported. Encourages entrepreneurship and independence from government aid and or subsidies. It's a great achievement. Now let's say if you give Samurdhi benefit to poor household, people in bottom of the pyramid, and if you want to continuously give those stuffs to the people, what happens? That cost has to be borne by rest of the public, right? Government in the sense, rest of the public through their tax or whatever other means. But if instead part of this Samurdhi cluster now moving to do small business like small boutique shop, roadside cafeteria, vegetable vendors, fish vendors. I mean, so many things you can find, right? Instead getting 5,000 or whatever from government, now they started their own business, but small scale. Would be a microfinancing firm. No harm, right? You can see vegetable seller. You can see some, string offer, and so rest of those things are being sold in your roadside, right? So they are now trying to become self-dependent, then dependent on something. What would happen here? So then no more government subsidies. They try to come up their own feet, add value to the economy, because they earn something. It's beneficial to whoever passes by, and they can do more on their household front for their kids, whatever, to improve their standard of living. And finally, as a family, they come up. So similar, many families can come up. What happened? As a team, we come up. That's what we expect from micro initiatives. Second one, provides poor people the opportunity to earn sustainable income, which in turn allows for better standard of living. Remember, sustainable income. That is the word. Because when they know that they can do, they carry out that type of activity continuously. So they know that value of the money, how to do marketing, how to do financing, and what type of working capital is required. And now they are earning regular income now, not like ad hoc. Maybe one day they earn something and following day they are no more. They are not that type of business. Now they basically, they know that, we can do this. They basically follow some basic ethics of the business also. Instead of having a table and a chair in the roadside, now they put a some steel structure with glass covered and all that. So you see some kind of a good presentation also. Now customer base has also increased. Yeah, the packaging might have been increased. Now, so every time, and you see there are, a couple of customers, waiting in the queue. So but all about that. So there is a confidence. There's a regularity there. So in terms that they can earn a sustainable income now. So which could help them to enhance their living standard, which is good. Collectively, it's good. So that helps to the general economy. Increase in disposable income. That is something that, rather than you earn and, again reinvest in the business, no. While doing this business now with your margins and all that, so now you earn something which you can use for some other activities. Maybe some of activities like maybe kids education, purchasing or upgrading some home furniture. So those are something that now they can think about. So what it means, so rather than they self-sufficient, now they have some income, additional cash flow, which helps them to increase their disposable income. Now they go to maybe another shop and purchase something, or maybe they purchase something called like electronic equipments. So that helps to economy again, because their purchasing power has gone up and they purchase it. Earlier, they can't even think about that. They just see, they can see a TV by passing in a town, in a kind of a shop. Now they are trying to own it. It's good for their kids, right? They go to the next level sometimes by looking at and kind of learning something. Then the fourth one, positive influence on social indicators, education, health, nutrition, as I was telling, because now since that they are afford to do it, they can go to next level. I mean, say we are discussing about, say, one family. Then combination of the similar families means society has a social impact. Empower the poor, which can correlate directly with political democracy and economic development. Now, you can think about not the day-to-day living. So they think about in a more macro perspective. Now the politicians, can't come and always, say we will give and I want your vote kind of thing may not happening now. You can see when you watching TV these days, when president trying to go and meet some villagers, not like those days, they come up their grievances. Now they are, telling whatever their grievances in front of all officers, all political authority. Why? Now they know they can do. If they were given these kind of the regulation relax, they can do more. Most of the thing they are talking about some kind of basic requirement, plus their small businesses that they want to grow. So then they know and they acquire a political facts also, increase their knowledge, and they know what's happening around. Now, suppose they are still dependent on something from the government, they may not come and voice their opinion, because now they can't tell anything. But now they are self-sufficient. They say that if the government allows us to bring our cattle to eat grass, that's what maximum we want. We don't want anything, right? Without any hassle. if the government authorities allow us to, feed our cattle with the grass, that's what we want. So then we will give the milk production. That's what the Cabinet people had to say when President made them. So they know that they can do, right? So what we want is this. We need not free money. So we will give something to the economy instead of bringing imported milk. We can produce the local milk, right? So you are getting my point, right? So this is how, as a collectively, microfinancing act as a a catalyst in economic development. Right. Any questions? We have a couple of new people join, and Shenuka, Malki, and Dilanja. I wish everybody a very happy New Year and all the very best for New Year as well. And again, I expect 2021 is kind of great year for us in terms of personal and in terms of official commitments and achieving those things. And I wish you also a very happy and prosperous New Year. Right. Having said that, any questions on what we discussed so far about microfinancing in general? We have yet to move to about detail the concepts of microfinancing. So far, we try to understand like SME microfinancing in macro perspective, the content in the context of economic development. So I must say these are very important in terms of general and in terms of exam as well, right? So there may be general questions like a small 5 marks write-up on how do you see microfinancing impact on countries' development. So what are the factors influencing countries' development? How do you understand the country's developing status in terms of microfinancing? What are the parameters that you would see? Or they must ask questions like MCQ, like GDP, per capita income, literacy ratio, those things they might ask and underline whatever the answers given. So those what we have learned. So any questions so far? Any questions? Right. So we move to next part, yeah, microfinancing in detail, right? So basically, this is the kind of a concept developed by Dr. Yunus, which is he was a professor in Bangladesh, and basically like he's a like inventor of this microfinancing concepts in Bangladesh. Later spreads to many other countries, and now today we can see many countries have been engaged in microfinancing application. This is a kind of brief profile of Dr. Yunus. And then Grameen Bank, the first kind of bank established in Bangladesh to support this microfinancing concept. So 76, as the Professor Yunus wanted to start that initiative. 83, which was founded by the Yunus, and basically it has this type of the data, yeah, performance, right? So it may be the current data may be some more have refined numbers, but just want to say that Grameen, which is an initiator established in Bangladesh, was doing great job to this, concepts, and from that, many other countries took the kind of application, and they also right now practicing this microfinancing concept. Right. So before that definition, we see why the microfinancing. If you want to answer that question, we can see majority of low-income group people in the country, if the country is underdeveloped or yet to gain the development status, you can see many number of people are earning income which is well below the average. So majority low-income group people are there in the country, and because of these people, you can see they don't have access to formal financial institution. Obvious, no? When you say they're low-income group, probably they don't have adequate money to invest on, say, education, literacy, financial discipline, and so other things. They were trying to live day-to-day life, and without focusing many important things which they can't do. And in terms of businesses, what they do, it is not sustainable. It could be irregular, seasonal, right? So they are unable to make it sustainable income, which again issue. They don't have collateral as a security, or like banks or financial institutions, they may ask, but they don't have it. They don't have tangible proofs for assessment of income, because income are seasonal, irregular, then they are unable to give the the assessment of income when bank ask. They don't have it. They can't give it. And the part two, number two, formal institutions can't directly offer products that suit cash flow of low income groups. That is again a factor that we need to think about. They can't go and directly offer for this requirements, meet these requirements, address these customers' grievances, because they are operating in a different model. These, we talk about large numbers. We need a lot of things to be done towards these small entrepreneurs and firms in order to bring them financial discipline, more organized business environment and all that. So a lot of things has to be done. So otherwise, may not be feasible for banks to go and directly cater their 100-odd requirement. Maybe different type of industries, different type of customers, different degree of knowledge. Further, formal institutions perceive high transaction and service cost, higher credit risk in terms of microfinancing entrepreneurs, which may not be correct always, but they perceive higher credit risk, means they expect higher default. Once you grant credit, they expect the default rates are higher. So then better we should not do lending with these type of people. Better we do banking with high-end SME, with corporate, because which we are very much comfortable. That's what they think. Then transaction and service cost, obviously it's high because it's in large numbers, small tickets. But whether it's a small or big ticket, the effort that you need to take is more or less similar. So which gives you higher cost in terms of system, processing, people, collection, and so other costs are high when you try to cater many number of people. So this is all about generally what banks and financial institutions wanted to do and what they can't do. So means we need something else. We need some kind of a proposition to attract, cater these type of customers. Hope you are getting me, right? So let's say if a customer in micro entrepreneur, and if it doesn't have a collateral to offer, then a general banking doesn't work here. You need to think about something else, how to support this type of entrepreneurs. So in that context, microfinancing is important. So that is why we try to answer why microfinancing question here. Then again, we try to justify microfinancing or rationalize microfinancing. Why people exclude from certain financial services? Similar question, like banks, they don't have a willingness to move to this market. Why? Lack of collateral, lack of guarantors, no or poor credit history, gap in the communication, lack of confidence in the bank, because now we might think about this way and we communicate this way, whereas they communicate a different way. There's a gap. So we see profile entrepreneur, but you see a half-baked entrepreneur there, a mismatch of communication, a gap. Doubt at the bank of the repayment. So because banks are doubtful, bank perceive higher credit risk. Bank think it's not easy to collect. Lack of access to financial infrastructure and services in remote areas, because the bank doesn't have adequate branch, enough sales, enough collection team, or even no adequate IT platform to reach these type of customers, which are spread in numbers in different in a vast area, or in a higher geography. So difficult to move in as the platform that you are having right now. Then what's the alternative? Alternative could be in microfinancing applications, where you need to do microfinancing with that concept, with that model, with that approach. So then you are successful if you move into that perspective, with that ammunition, with that knowledge, with that skills, with that infrastructure. That's how the Bangladesh survived. Bangladesh was successful. Professor Yunus was successful. Right. Now, this is a very important slide. Here we are trying to understand, define microfinancing. So sometimes in exam, we have been asked to define microfinancing and its service providers. 2 questions which you can get 5 marks. First, we try to, the stakeholders, right? They ask about what is microfinancing and their stakeholders, or what are the beneficiaries, that type of question. So we'll first try to understand microfinancing, and then we'll see who are the beneficiaries from that. So microfinancing can be categorized into 2 microfinancing. Micro is not only entrepreneurs. Yes, micro entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneur is the kind of a customer, and institutions like micro enterprises. That's the cluster of people when you say micro. Another feature is they are self-employed, because they are the one who does the business, who is doing the business. Self-employed. They are not employees of another company. No, they do it all. Another feature is low income population. They are not middle income. They are not high income. They are low income in the economy. It's the bottom of the pyramid. A low income group. Excluded population also, because nobody has looked after them. They excluded in terms of banking application, banking focus group. Excluded population, low income population, self-employed population, micro entrepreneurs and enterprises. Those we can identify as micro. Right. Move to the business, finance. When you say finance, it's not only loans. Micro loans is one of them. There are some other things also when you talk about finance. Now, generally we say microfinance, we think about loans to this micro sector. No, not only loans. Business educational loans are the micro loans, yes. And you talk about savings also in this sector. It's a higher component because they can save also. If you take Samurdhi, not only loans, they in turn they save something. And today you see the higher component of savings in this Samurdhi Bank. Because when you give something, they save in turn something. The same money, but it's a saving habit. Similarly, in microfinancing, when you say finance, like generally in banking also we say financing, not only granting loans. Remember SME banking? We talk about insurance. We talk about savings. We talk about loans. Similarly, here, loans, savings, insurance. Remittance is also a part of that microfinancing products. So this 4 and plus will be a financing products. Right? When you say microfinancing, now remember, not only microloans, there are some other products included that. Then another component would come here. Finance plus services. Like product and services, if this is the product, and there are some plus services, like SME plus services. So about training, coaching, and workshops on hygiene and health, and marketing, financial discipline, IT familiarization. So those things also a part of microfinancing application. Now, earlier you might have learned about SME plus services. What are those? They are not like lending, not only lending. You support them to uplift their business skills. Similarly, in micro entrepreneurs also, rather than giving funds and collecting, you try to uplift their standard. I mean, say business standard. For that, you need to train them. Train in different arms. To finance, to accounting, to bookkeeping, to marketing, to negotiation skills, to, I mean, so many things you will do. So that makes a different entrepreneur with your financing plus a value-added services. So when you say microfinancing, it basically the micro and the finance is important, right? So if you trying to put into a one sentence, a definition is offer of financial and non-financial services. So what are those financial and non-financial services? That is coming under the finance. To people excluded from the traditional banking system. The services are adapted to the needs of target population. That's a one-word definition. And these are important characteristics of microfinancing definition. The beneficiaries, the target market, are being supported by enabling these four. What? Create sustainable activity. Remember sustainable income? How to become sustainable income generator? In order to become sustainable income generator, you have to support them, create sustainable activities. We'll take one example. Say, now you see a vegetable vendor by the side of the road, and then if the particular entrepreneur or micro entrepreneur does this business regularly, and then day by day you can see the variety is going to change, and kind of offering and infrastructure, and they are sourcing of these things, and marketing, customer. So you see that there are some change on this particular customer. Oh, later in the time that you can see that he is delivering goods to household, or you can see he is getting the orders through WhatsApp and kind of thing, smart telephone. So that's how you see a sustainable activity. Then being in the same act for about eternally on ad hoc basis, like today you can see that guy selling one or two items, following day you can't see, or maybe another week's time that he's there with a different set of items, right? So it's not sustainable because there's some issue with the knowledge gap, or there may financial resources, right? So like that, you need to see how that to create the sustainable activity. So it's a part of the bank, part of the financial institutions who does microfinancing, because rather than giving funding and recovering, you need to do non-financial services also. Then only the beneficiary is unable to create sustainable income. Reduce external shocks, what it means. So if things happen outside his control, and then if that has an impact on his activity, it's not a good thing. But if we can do something to reduce external shocks, example, say a particular vendor, doing the vegetable thing, buying and selling, and let's say some kind of probably a lockdown, probably a import restrictions. Now he has to depend on this lockdown, import restrictions. Then what happened? He is open to external shocks. Then now he can't have big onion because it's locked down, it's restricted, or maybe dal, or whatever. So instead what he would do is, yes, he can't. But in this long run, in the medium run, instead of buying and selling, if he has cultivated some of the vegetable requirement in his own yard, then whether that is still to the external, no. The impact now come down, because there may be some substitutes available. Because in own yard there are some vegetables, right? Maybe potato, maybe big onion. Now, suppose that he could, cultivate in his own yard, what happened? No problem, right? Because its customer base is limited, requirement is also limited, so he can cater their requirement. Now it's internally supplied. So like that, when you are going up in the ladder, so you try to reduce the external shocks, improve the condition. That's a standard level we are talking about: health, education, other things. So it should be outcome of this microfinancing proposition. Last one is empower people, and mainly the women. because we need to empower decision making, accountability, leadership, right? To try to empower these business women and men. So when you are talking about entrepreneurship, microfinancing, so important thing is, while you provide financial, non-financial services to this excluded population in a country, while supporting them to achieve, create, produce, improve, empower characteristics. So important slide again, like previous one and this one, because when you have been asked to a kind of a short note on microfinancing, you can take most of these things and you can write a good answer, right? Before moving to the target client, any question? Any question? Any questions? Nothing? Tarindu, okay with the stuff? Oshani, done? Malaka, Maliki, how we are faring? Thanks, Tarindu. Dilanja, Hansani. Thanks, Oshani. This is not very technical stuff. Yeah, thanks, Malaka. Thanks, Dilanja. If anything, yes, please let me know, because these are not very technical or complex stuff, but important, because every paper you see there's a question from microfinancing. Once you do the past papers, you can understand, what type of questions. Very easy, I must say. So you can, score at least more than 15 for that type of a question. So for the exam perspective, yes, we need to always try this question in paper, because no technicality involved. You can get maximum marks out there. Fine. So now we move to next part, that is the target market or beneficiaries they took. In general, so we in a population, in a economy, you can see there are customers, high net worth, middle income, low income, ultra poor, right? In any economy, you can see high net worth individuals, super rich we call, and there may be middle class, like maybe part of us also in that middle class, mid segment. There are low income group and ultra poor also. That ultra poor means, right, you can see so many people in the country that not easy to bring them quickly to the next level, right? But this low income group, like poor, vulnerable, bottom of the pyramid, and you can target these species, I must say, this population through the microfinancing. These are our target market. So low income entrepreneurs and enterprises. But remember, they are capable guys. They have skills. They have entrepreneurial skills. But they don't have adequate money to start with. Or they need a further fine-tuning of their skills. That's what financial and non-financial services are very important in this context. Not like SMEs, because they know how to make money, but they don't know how to sustain it on consistent basis. That is the issue, right? So generally they say they earn something and they say all sales are their profit. Sometimes they don't know what is profit, what is in the working capital, how much they need to keep for their reinvestment or the working capital. They don't know sometimes. They say, I sold everything, I got something 10,000, so I have to go and spend it. But following day, not enough money to purchase working capital. So like that, very important that this non-financial services. So this is the sector that you need to work on. Low income, excluded population, which needs additional support in terms of non-financial services to create the 4 things that which I have just discussed. Then microfinancing, there are some myths as well as some reality. Because now microfinancing, there are some myths like poor, not bankable. We must say, they are low income, they are poor, so we can't depend on them. Not bankable. So we can do banking with high-end SME, big corporate, like that. And another myth is microfinancing is only microcredit. No. You learn that there are some other things as well. Insurance, remittances, savings, and so many things. Or maybe we presume that microfinancing is only group lending. No. Group plus individual lending also is there. Because when the time they move to next level, micro to SME level, small level, you can do transaction. Individual lending also, because now they have come to that level of financial discipline. And some would say it's a social activity, only charitable activity. No, you can make it profitable as well. So that's what the reality is. Poor bankable, range of financial services, group plus individual lending can be profitable, because many developed countries use the microfinancing in a profitable way. So somebody would think microfinancing is only for developing or not developed countries. No, developed countries also doing this microfinancing. Take example now, what is microfinancing? So it's something individual, we say bottom of the pyramid, excluded and all are correct. But in terms of more sophisticated way, you can use a microfinancing is like in a developed economy also, there are some people. You're getting my point? But there, when you say, if you take Israel, there may be excluded population, or there may be not so much poor like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. There are some people in the bottom of the pyramid. Right? They don't earn like millions. They are again high net worth individual. In every economy you have. But those people could be approached the microfinancing. But only difference is it's higher standard. They do everything through, say, online, smart versions, right? Very sophisticated, sustainable. So many things. But only thing is less infrastructure, less cost, less in terms of space and all that. But they make it as profitable. They earn much. Margins are very high. Now let's say a software development. So instead of Microsoft doing it, if he can outsource to million of single users to do the development for them, and they purchase wherever in a necessary or applicable way, what happens? If Microsoft to hire engineers and do it, they have to pay thumping amount. Whereas a village chap who is smart in computing, they might do software for the benefit of Microsoft. So at a lesser cost, lesser infrastructure, but the quality are same. Quality standards are equal. So like that, so you can think about microfinancing in that aspect as well. So microfinancing, not always charitable or social activity. You can do it some level. It's a profitable activity as well. That's a challenge sometimes in these days, because now you think about microfinancing in more sustainable, more sort of the support activity, right? But you have focused more on profitability. So then it's that you are moving away from this, supporting this thing or supporting the non-financial services side. So you focus more on financial gain. So in that case, there may be conflict of interest in objectives. So those things also a factor coming as a challenge in developed countries, not the developing countries. What are the constraints in microfinancing? There are some limitations. What are those? Like SME, there are some constraints. Information asymmetry is higher for the poor with no credit history, because in microfinancing, now information are not transparent or there are no uniformity. Now, because since the poor, they don't have a credit history, so you are not in a good position to judge their credit worthiness. So information symmetry is a question. It's a problem. Poor, unable to offer collateral, it's a constraint because they don't have it or they're not quality enough to give for a bank or organization. Thirdly, financial literacy is not up to the standard. So you need close supervision. As I was telling, yes, they're good at earning, but they don't know how to manage it. How much to save, how much to keep for the reinvestment, how much to keep for the personal, how much for the working capital, how much for the capex. So like that, they don't know. They don't know how to bookkeeping. They don't know how to collect the debts kind of thing. So you need close supervision. It's a constraint. Geographical access is difficult because they are not, limit to particular area. Say Western provinces, you have so many branches, so you can even personally attend. But these type of entrepreneurs are, spread across the country. If you take Monaragal, for example, we say cattle farmers. And maybe they are located, in a vast majority of area. Difficult to monitor, difficult to, support their day-to-day requirements. You don't have adequate support or resources as a bank. Then fifth one, they require low value transaction, but high transaction cost. Because if you take high-end SME, they won't set 10 million loan at one tranche against a security or whatever, because their requirement is high. But if you take a micro entrepreneur, they don't need 1 million. They need 100,000 max. But 100,000, 100 people located in a vast geographical area. So difficult for you to monitor, to collect, to supervise and all those things. So higher transaction cost. Technology levels are not so great, so up to date. Again, some issues, maybe signal strength to infrastructure to inability to obtain smart facilities, smartphones and like. So that GPS tracking and all that may not be readily available. So based on that, then you see some constraints. I must say that it's not cakewalk. It's not easy to undertake, microfinancing tomorrow, even for established bank. So that's why you see many banks are not very much into this. Instead, non-government organization and some finance companies are gearing this, whereas established banks started this as a pilot project, not in a more attractive, lucrative, major initiative. So due to these constraints. So service providers, there are a couple of service providers, formal institutions like banks, Semi-formal institutions like NGOs, corporate societies, informal sources like money lenders, shopkeepers. So you can see, a many number of institutions and people are engaged in microfinancing proposition, right? So the act actually initiated to control some of these stakeholders, but it didn't give adequate results. Hence, now they are revisiting the act, which try to cover a wider service providers and wider application of microfinancing in order to have a more regulated microfinancing business in time to come. But as per now, only the 2016 Act is in operation, which are very limited, relative, rare in usage. Right. So why banks interested in microfinancing? Couple of reasons. One thing is meeting priority sector lending, because every bank is being given, is being advised, is being directed by central bank to give some lending to priority needy sectors like agri. So in that sense, banks wanted to do microfinancing in order to meet that requirement. CSR, as a corporate social responsibility, banks prefer to move to microfinancing segment. Opportunity for growth when the industry flourishes, because if you are into that, and if you see that more agricultural, more industrial, more service levels at low level is taking place in time to come, it is good that you can cash in that opportunity. And if you see that if the government are trying to in 2021 they're trying to promote like 20,000 odd self-development initiatives in countrywide. So most of these people are micro entrepreneur or small industries or small business people. So if you are in that proposition, if you are developing infrastructure, your concepts and all that, so when they are doing well, obviously you can make more investment. Risk diversification also possible, rather than you into corporate sector and SME, there is always a risk when something happened to that high level, maybe to customer level or maybe to industry level, right? So there may be a big impact. But instead of having all eggs in one basket, so you can diversify your risk by moving to small segment, medium segment, high-end, micro sector, so like that. So you can do more risk diversification as well. So those are some of the the interested thinking behind moving to microfinancing by banks. Right. So before moving to the third part, models, any thoughts, any idea, any gray area, any clarifications? Is any of your bank is engaged in microfinancing activities or even in pilot form? I know for sure that HNB was doing this in great extent. They have been doing it even past also, but some other banks are not very commercial level they are doing, but they as pilot projects they have started and they succeeded also, I suppose. And if you take regional development banks, SDB and all that, yes, they are more into this microfinancing application, though they don't call it as a microfinancing, but they are into like cooperative society lending and all that, so they are focusing these type of entrepreneurs. But application is more or less like a microfinancing models and that. Right. Any questions? let's move to the next part, that is microfinancing models. Now, there may be several models that one can discuss, one can define, right? But I have taken 4 models here, right? And so just to give an understanding how these type of models are being worked out and in the microfinancing delivery methods. Self-help group, joint liability group, Grameen model, individual lending. These are the 4 type of models that I have taken. And then first we look into the SHG group, self-help group model. Before moving to that, so let's take, this is how the SHG bank. So bank, there's SHG and the NGO as a facilitator. This is how it operates, right? And then we move back. Right. This is homegrown, saving base, savings later. Here, now there are a couple of entrepreneurs got together and form a group, and then they deposit money in a bank, and the bank in turn gives money in small tickets, so within that cash cover. Because here, so we expect they have not done very well in this microfinancing, and they are at a very initial stage, so the risk to the public sector bank or the NGOs are minimal, because here you try to give loans against the savings that particular individuals is kept in your organization, right? So if you see saline features, it's a 10 to 20 people. Every member saves small amount regularly, like daily basis they save something. And under this group, so there is that savings, right? And against the money, you can give a small ticket size money to these group members. So why they basically this is they are to learn them more financial ethics, right? How to save, how to borrow, how to repay, know how to treat the other members in the team, like, right? So that because by doing so, they develop their skills, financial skills. Later, if required, you can take a bank loan towards this self-help group deposit. So with that, you can give more loans to the members. But that is happening after some time, not immediately. Because like say, if you have saved something, say 5 million as a SHG, about 20 members, the bank would give a loan to that, maybe about 1 million. And then maybe 6 million is now the pool, and then you can get the money out of that. Now, so what happened here is, bank also not taking higher risk here, because this is the initial stage. They try to keep a kind of always adequate margin against the cash deposits, because the deposits has been cumulative, grown from the small savings given by these members. So that's the SHG, the primitive model, where NGO is a facilitator in terms of financial discipline and other aspects, where bank and SHG basically is working in hand to hand, where SHG members started the kind of we call kitty, or that float in a bank by regular savings. So based on the savings, the members can draw loans. Later, based on the deposit, the bank also could give more advances, and then the value of the float, the kitty, will be go up, and again you can do more loans. There is interest bearing loans, frequently, like, weekly or daily basis, they can, repay also, because it's a primitive starting model. Basically, this would give the chance for these entrepreneurs to develop their financial and non-financial skills. Then the JLG, bit of advanced, it's like this. Bank, microfinancing institutions, and JLG is the kind of the hierarchy. And how it happens is not like 20 odd members, 5 to 6 members in a group. So each member's loan is guaranteed by another member or two within the group. So lending is not linked to the savings now, because they have moved to the next level. They can take higher amounts, right? And loans given to the individual members of the group, right? There are no group meeting like those. Here, 5 or 6 individual member can take a loans, and loans are not savings linked. They can take individual loans higher than the SHT. And earlier there may be small tickets, but here it bit of higher tickets. Other features are members typically involve different projects. Not that earlier case, maybe the same homogeneous activity, they do a same activity also possible. But here, these individuals may do different businesses also. I am running the boutique, he is running the vegetable, he is running the fish, or like that. But I am responsible for the loan obtained by other members of my group. Starting with small, then you can go for the loan, bigger loan sizes as well. In case of a default, other members also are liable to pay on behalf of the defaulting member. So it's basically joint liability. It's a earlier self-help is something you save, and against that you get risk is minimal to the bank. But here risk is bit high, because individually you are giving loan, but other members are guaranteeing that loan. Third one, Grameen, more sophisticated, right? It's like organized better than earlier versions. 5 members from a group, 5 members. And like that, there are 8 groups in a center. The center every week is going to meet. So leaders are chosen by the members. Regular savings are there, but not compulsory, not linked to the savings. Loans to individual borrowers by microfinancing institutions. Loans approved by the center. Again, if default, guaranteed members are liable to pay. But there's no major difference in terms of operations, but more organized, because 5 members, there are 8 groups, there are center, we call the center will get each loan application, they look for the project and they approve. Then says Arvodaya or whatever, they give the money. And then, the monitoring again by those people. And then, if I'm taking a loan, other members can guarantee that. More cohesiveness, advanced operations, higher ticket size are the kind of features of this model. Last one is the individual. This is higher tickets. Microfinancing organization staff, they do appraisal, sanction individually, right? So you can select members, good members, performing members among the groups. And then collateral, there could be a possibility. Then when you are giving a loan, you will see the cash flow pattern. Rather than just give 25,000 to 100,000 to 200,000, no. Here you see the potential also you looked into, whether they are good at generate cash flows. and then you can give higher ticket size as well. So it means like you are moving to the small or medium size of the organization type. You are very small, you come to a medium type, and then a micro at higher level, and beyond that, small level businesses. That's why you are, trying to give individual lending. So when you are moving to that level, obviously you have some asset purchase under your name. So that's why the collateral is also a possibility, right? So this is the difference between SHG to Grameen. So you can say earlier savings base, but later you see that they are not so much into the savings, but individual performance, sustainable performance are a criteria at Grameen level, right? So you can go for higher loan tickets if you're performing well, like taking a loan, paying, taking a loan, paying, small tickets to medium to high tickets. But finally, you move to the individual type of lending also. So the Grameen model is more acceptable worldwide, right? This group, center, team, internal decisions, right? More.
We sets the the computer right. So we'll just run through what we have done so far. So we started about the microfinancing, and we discussed the importance of microfinancing into like general economy, countries development, and there we also learn about what is like important parameters we need to know in terms of say microfinancing and its application. As I told you, like there may be some exam questions to that extent to know about like GDP, per capita income, and so on and so forth. So that's what the part one we discussed today. And part two, we went into detail. That's about what is microfinancing, what is micro, what is financing, and what is like the myths and realities. And again, we discuss about what are the constraints in microfinancing, and also we learned about what are the the stakeholders, I mean providers in the microfinancing. Those things were learned. Finally, for the exam purposes, I told you like many questions has been given us, like one could be is like the definition of the microfinancing, and the other could be like what are the beneficiaries, the target market of this microfinance. Very common question. So you need to know to answer those type of questions. And as the last part, we discuss about what are the models. There are 4 models that we discussed in microfinancing. There may be so many other models available, but here we try to learn 4 models in microfinancing. The first one was self-help group, where you try to deal with these micro entrepreneurs when they are the very basic level. They are yet to develop financing and non-financing skills, and they don't know how to do the the business in sustainable way. So that's why banks are not taking a higher risk. So instead, the banks take average or minimal risk, where they try to give loans against the savings. But here, the NGOs, they are to support or develop these type of financial and non-financial skills. Then we move to the joint liability groups. There it is a better version, where that you have not like 10-20 people. There are some 5-6 people, and they equipped with these skills that what we were referring earlier. And when you are taking a loan, the other people in the group, they are guaranteeing that particular credit. In case of a default, they are come and in support of the particular individual. And again, you can borrow loans, I mean in frequent intervals. If you are good at servicing, repaying, you can go for a next higher ticket size. Similarly, that not like previous, here you can always do a different business activities. Let's say one person could do do maybe vegetable
could be another. Have you opened the record? Okay. Could be another business also. Thank you, Karen. So basically, right. Okay. So basically, the another is like so they go for different businesses also. So that's about the third one. And fourth one is the individual lending, where since that they have come to kind of a higher level, and then you can get a loan alone, right? Individual basis, right? So you are taking a higher risk, and then this one, you are taking a higher risk, and again you are being evaluated individually. So that's also the final stage that we are planning to do. So those are the 4 methods that we have learned, and this is the third area that we have discussed under the microfinancing. So this is the last one that we are moving to, that is about Microfinancing Act. I think you can see this, right? Hope you can see the presentation, right? How it's in back. So that I මට බලන්න බෑ නේද? නෑ මේක ඇති මේ මට අර ගොල්ලන්ට ඇහෙනවද පේනවද කියන එක චෙක් කරගන්න. Right, fine. And okay, fine. Okay, so let's move to the last one, that is Microfinancing Act, which is number 6 of 2016. Now, as I was telling you, so far, very few companies have been registered under this act, and it is in compliance. But many organizations are, yet to, on board under this act, and there may be several limitations. So hence that, central bank is now revisiting the acts and try to incorporate even the money lenders into the, proposition, where to try to cover their activities as well with the new act being in the formation. But however, since this has been the the official act in operation, it's better that we need to know some of the major areas and what are the businesses that the microfinancing institutions can engage in day-to-day businesses. Because if you see some past papers, you can see some questions has been asked to that level, right? Major areas is like similar like a bank. A microfinancing can do most of the activities, except accepting like operating a current account, right? That's a major difference in the banks versus the microfinancing organization. Under the act, the major areas is they talk about licensing, they talk about restrictions on licensed companies, managing, they issue directions to govern microfinancing companies, and then they maybe request financial statement and audit on licensed companies, then supervision, license cancellation, then also they can supervise non-government organizations and setting principle, standard, ethics, right? So these are some of the major areas of the act. So in case the question could be like, what are the major areas of Microfinancing Act, you may be in a position to list down at least 3-4 items under this slide. Then this is again a common question. They might ask about what are the businesses they can engage, they can do. That's another question that you might ask. So again, accepting and operating current account, they can do almost all other activities performed by the banks. Like they can provide financial facilities, accommodation, with or without collateral, time saving deposit. They can, give credit for capex, working capital financing, and all those things. They also can invest money in maybe treasury bills and all that, like banks does. They also can do like pledge facilities, like safes, custody, storage, and those also things. And they can do non-financial services like professional advice, because it's a part of their mandate. And maybe they also can mitigate some kind of risk through different financial instruments. These are some key kind of businesses that they can, undertake and operate. So why I haven't given more information on this act, basically, because in general, they have asked these two particular areas. So you need to be bit thorough, because whenever they ask questions, they might ask as one of these questions as part of the main questions to give 5 marks. So it's good that you are ready with these 2 areas. So in addition, I think I have earlier shared, I think it's now I can't share it here. There is another document, is a Word document I have shared earlier, which is not right now here, but it's also, if you can go through it, and there basically I have given some kind of a short note where wherever the past papers questions, I have taken it as a kind of a short note there, right? So it's also good that you can go through that with the microfinancing tune. So with that, basically, I am done with the microfinancing today's session. Now it's over to you about, say, any questions, any areas that you want to clear it in today's session. Let me hear you that anything that you need further value addition. Dilanja, Hansani, any area that you need to clear? Malaka, Oshani, Harindu, any area that, how do you see this? Is it a difficult session or difficult area, or you mean say that you could handle it without much difficulty, much complexity? Subject area, I mean syllabus area, how do you see? In my purview, I think, my perspective, I think it's not a difficult, right? It's like everybody has to, try for that question. That's my advice. And because it's a very easy question also, it could be I suggest that you can start with that type of a question if it is coming in a way that so far it has been given. Now, like in general, when you are answering questions, you should not start with MCQ as your first question, or mathematical question as your first question. And so probably it's good that you start like this type of a question as your first question, because you are confident also, and things that you have worked with, and then you know that how much you have written, and how confident that how much you have got like that, because at the end of the writing that that exactly you scored this much. So this is the kind of question that you need to attempt as a first question, right? So that's all about the microfinancing. And anything that you have issues on the first 3 lessons, any area or anything that you need to recap? Okay, then next week, since that we have done bit of SME and bit of microfinancing, I can move to the project financing area, because I'm not exactly starting with the project financing, because there are some other ingredients to support project financing, like break even, working capital, financial and financial tools, forecasting, and so we try to do all sort of thing, and then we do the project financing in detail, right? So that's my plan is. So that's like option 1. The option 2 is like I also can do a thing like, since that we have done SME and the microfinancing sector, what we could do is we can attempt some past paper questions relevant to SME and microfinancing, and then we can move to the project financing area. So I want your views on that. How do you think? Whether to start directly the project financing stuff and continue, and after doing everything go for past paper questions, or do something what we have done so far, maybe week or two, in terms of SME and microfinancing, and then move to the project financing stuff. So let's have your views first. How do you feel comfortable? Better if we can do some past papers is Tarindu's opinion. What about Malaka? What about Hansani? What about Oshani? What about Dilanja? It doesn't mean that I am not going to do past papers at the end on what we have done. No, I will do whatever all relevant questions on selected basis in post lecture, like post session. Yeah, Hansani also to say that past papers. So my suggestion is like we can select like 2-3 questions in each area, and then we do kind of some yeah, Dilanja, yeah. So 3 of you are suggesting. What about the other 2? Malaka and Oshani, you are also the majority view, or since you are 5 of us that we have 3 to with past papers, and Malki also joined. Malki, what we are discussing is whether to start some past papers. Yeah, Oshani, thanks. Start some past paper question relating to SME and microfinancing, and then move to the project financing, because my understanding is like, though they are not difficult. Okay, Malki. So we'll so then what we'll do is like thanks, Malaka. So I will select few questions related to SME and the microfinancing, maybe next week or week after that. So we will do, and maybe some kind of interactive session during the class. We are trying to discuss those questions, and then we move to the project financing, because I also think it's good, because then at least Malki, I haven't decided the year and month because I have to see what are the the questions relevant to SME and micro. But what you could do is, since that we have papers available 2016, 17, 18, I'm not sure the 19 papers also there. So we'll try to do maybe 16, 17, 18, 19, like 4 years, and I will select SME and microfinancing questions, selecting some questions which are relevant to what we have learned. So if you have a chance, yes, please purchase past papers, and I think you can go through. And if not, if you don't have the past papers, no harm. So I will do the kind of past paper scanning and the answers also. So we'll share both, so that you have both the answers and the questions. So what I wanted to discuss is something, the approach, because anyway you can see the question and you can see the answer, but I want to give some models. I want to give you some answering plan, so then you can build on that. So then it will further familiarize. So everybody, so yeah, in the opinion that we start with some past papers relating to SME and relating to microfinancing, and after that we will move to the project financing area, because we have adequate time. Hope that you are not sitting exam this time, because now they have set some exam about, I think, in January or February. So then there are some revision classes also. During that period, I'm not sure whether that we can continue these classes, but if you are not, attempting the past papers, obviously, we can continue the our classes. Let's see. All right, Malki, that you are going to sit, then probably you might have to, if required, you have to attend revision classes, right, Tarindu? So let's see that how well that we are going to do classes those 2 or 3 days. So I'll try to do a kind of a less impact on whoever who is going to sit on these exams if the IBSL wanted to continue classes. So let's plan it since that we have some more time. And so next 2 weeks or next week or so, we will do some past papers. I'll select some past papers and discuss it next time. So if you don't have any questions right now, so we can wind up the class. So any questions for today's session or the previous? Okay, so let's again wish everybody a very happy and prosperous, healthy, safe New Year. So wish you all the very best for you, all your personal and official endeavors, and let's make do better and better in terms of exam in coming year. So let's see that how well that we can achieve our goals, though that the challenging times are ahead. So thank you again for joining me, and have a good week ahead. So let's meet next Sunday as usual time. Thank you.